Hey everybody, how's it going? It's me, your guy Mikigai, and today I've made a new Hololive tier list. I am ranking the girls on whether I can beat them in a fight or not. Now, for some context, I've never been in any fights. I have two sisters, and I can promise you they beat the hell out of me every single time, man. I've never been physically gifted. I'm a weak man, but I do think if I was given the chance to face the girls one-on-one, mano-mano, for whatever reason, I could beat at least some of them in a fight. So I hope you guys are ready for some lighthearted fun. If you are, please drop a like, comment, and subscribe. And with all that said, let's get to it. Okay, so the way this is gonna work is we are starting at the very bottom and then we're gonna work our way to the top. So the first tier is the I beat them tier list, also known as just a girl tier list. Now, most of the girls on this tier are the most normal members in Hololive in terms of, you know, lores and abilities and things like that. So theoretically speaking, I should be able to beat them. So let's see who's made it on this tier list. We are starting off with Oski and Sora. Oski and Sora, they are some of the OGs here in Hololive, but that also means they are some of the most normal girls here in Hololive. Sora's just a diva, and Oski's just a digital diva, so making the assumption that she takes physical form and then I can fight her, I think these girls are no match for me in all my, my weak power. Next up, I have Himamori Luna and Shiranui Flare. So for Luna, she is technically the princess of a candy kingdom based on her lore, but I didn't really find anything, whether she had like candy powers or any abilities besides that, so she just seems to be a normal princess, and if that's the case, I think I can beat her. As for Flare, for whatever reason, whenever I think of Flare, for whatever reason, I think she's like a fire elf. I think it's because Lami's like an ice elf, so I kind of make this connection that Flare would be the opposite of Lami, but that's not the case. She is just pretty much a normal, noble elf, and since she is just a normal elf girl, I think I would also beat her. Next up on this list, I have Muna Hoshinova, and I have a similar problem with her for whatever reason, I think she has moon powers going on, but based on her lore, she seems to be just a normal diva, and if that's the case, well then, I think I could pretty much take Muna on as well. After those girls, I have the majority of the Regloss crew, that's Ririka, Kanade, Raden, and Hajime. I love the Regloss girls, but they are very normal. They have some motifs in their designs, but in terms of ability, lore, weapons, they don't have anything. So with that said, the Regloss girls could be easy competition. Next up, I have Yofi, who's an alien girl, and I couldn't find anything, whether she had any weapons, abilities, you know, that you would associate with being an alien, so she kind of just seems more like a normal girl than an alien, so if that's the case, then yes, Yofi is easy competition as well. And to finish off this tier, I have Momosuzu Nene, Natsuhiro Matsuri, and Sakura Miko, who are just very normal girls. And that finishes off this tier with a total of 13 Hololive members. So it's time for the next tier, and this is the most likely beat them tier. This is the tier for the girls that might have one or two things that set them apart from the tier below, but are still pretty beatable in my opinion. So let's start off with Akai Hato, aka Hachima. Now, Hachima has some things going for her. For one, she's lived in Australia, one of the most dangerous, inhospitable countries in the world. She survived her own cooking, which is an accomplishment within itself. She's a bit more unhinged than other girls here in Hololive, but based on her lore, she is still just a normal idol. So because she doesn't have any true abilities or weapons, she just has a more tougher than normal mental and physical state. I think I can beat her most likely, but she could get the run up on me. Next up, we have Anya Melfisa. Now, Anya is supposed to be the human manifestation of a powerful ancient sword, which would put her pretty high on the list, but I don't think she can actually turn back into that sword form. I think she is stuck as her human form. So if that's the case, that just makes her a tougher than normal girl. And if that's the case, I think I could most likely beat Anya. Next up is Hakui Koyori, who is a scientist, and I would be worried if she uses uses those science potions in battle or any of her science technology, but I think a lot of the time Korea also makes a lot of mistakes and can be a bit clumsy, so I think it evens out pretty much, making her pretty beatable. Next up is Iris, and Iris is a Nephilim, which is pretty cool, but I've never seen her use her Nephilim powers. I don't know if there's like an official canon release showing her using those powers or anything within her lore saying what kind of things she can do. So for that, she seems pretty normal. If that's the case, she belongs on this tier. Next up, we have Nanashi Mume. Now, Mume is the guardian of civilization, but it's kind of difficult to tell what that title entails. I don't think it comes with any abilities or powers. She's just more like an overseer of humanity. She does seem to be a bit more on the athletic side than some other girls, so if that's the case, that makes her a bit tougher than the normal girls in the tier below, but I think she's still pretty beatable, so I think putting her on this tier is acceptable. Now we have Nekomata Okayu, who is a cat girl, and if that's the case, I would assume she has cat-like athleticism, but she does not seem to be much of a fighter. She seems to be one of the more peaceful members here in Hololive, so if that's the case, I think the fight would go pretty well in my favor. Next up, we have Shiori, Novella of Hololive Advent. So she is an archiver, which pretty much just means she's a goth librarian, a big book nerd, which I love. But in terms of a fight, I don't know how useful that is. Now, she's probably very intelligent due to how much knowledge she consumes, but in terms of physical ability on a one-on-one fight with me, I think I might have the advantage here. So putting her here seems reasonable to me. And lastly, to round out this tier, we have Tokoyami Toa, who is a devil girl, but similar to a lot of other girls, I couldn't really find anything whether she has or has used devil-like powers, so if that's the case, she just seems a tougher than normal girl, so putting her here seems reasonable as well. So that's everyone in the I most likely beat them tier list, so we are going to move on to the next one, which is the I have the advantage tier list. Now this is a tier list where I still think I am most likely to be the victor here, but I am not leaving that fight without at least a bruise or a scratch. So first off is Ayuna Risu of Hololive ID. Now Risu is a squirrel girl, and because of that, I think she'd be pretty scrappy in the fight. I think that would make her pretty athletic, plus she looks like she wouldn't mind playing dirty, you know, poking me in the eyes, kicking me in the nuts, doing, you know, a lot of low blow kind of stuff, which is all good for her. Terrible for me, but I think at the end of the day, I can scrap by and beat Ayuna Risu. Next, we have Kobo Kaneru, also of Hololive ID, and she also seems like she would fight dirty similar to Risu, and she definitely seems like she could go into a gremlin-like mode, just grabbing and clawing and scratching and all that, but she does seem pretty beatable due to her small stature, so I think putting her here is fine. Speaking of shorties, next up we have Lapless Darkness of Holo X. Now she has those big horns which seem dangerous, and she also has those shackles that seem pretty heavy and could deal a pretty good punch if it landed on me, but similar to Kobo, because of her small stature, I think I could beat Lapless in one good KO, just, you know, if I get one good bonk, and I think that'd be the end of the match. Next up is Okami Mio. Now Mio is a wolf girl, which would make her pretty athletic and set up for a pretty fair fight, but she seems to be really nice. Similar to Okyu, where Okyu doesn't seem like much of a fighter, Mio also doesn't seem like much of a fighter, and if that's the case, I might be able to pull off the win there. Now we have Usada Pekora. Now Pekora is a rabbit girl, so based on assumption she has rabbit-like speed and agility, that would put her much higher on the tier list, but I'm not sure if she actually does have rabbit-like abilities, so for that I decided to even it out, put her a bit lower but still in a good position, so I think I have the advantage is a good spot for her. And lastly for this tier, I have Yuzuki Choco, who similar to Lapless has some dangerous horns, but she's also supposed to be a demon, and I don't know if she actually has demon-like powers or if she's shown that. If that's the case, she doesn't seem like much of a fighter, so I just have to worry about those horns. So if that's the case, I think putting her on this tier, similar to Lapless, makes a lot of sense. So that's the end of that tier, and we're moving on to what I personally think is the most interesting tier, the fair fight tier. This is for the girls who I think are pretty dead even with me. It could go either way, and I wouldn't mind losing them at all. So first off is Aki Rosenthal. Now Aki Rosenthal is very famous for her dance skills. She is a very good dancer, which would imply a lot of good athleticism with her, and she also is very well known for Muki Rose, the very strong version of Aki Rose. So if that's the case, I think me and Aki are gonna be pretty dead even there. Next up, we have the Fuomoko Girls. Now the Fuomoko Girls are demon dogs, and they have shown to have that dog-like agility, which is not good for me. They also have shown to have pretty good wrestling skills. If you ever seen their 3D live, they've proven they know how to wrestle, which is very dangerous for me, but they also do seem very sweet and not very menacing at all, so I think that evens out just a little bit, making this a fairer fight than I initially thought. Next up, we have Hako's Bales. Now Hako's Bales, also a very good dancer, one of the best dancers here in Hololive, which would also imply a lot of good athleticism on her part, and on top of that, she is the representation of chaos and disorder, which seems like a problem to deal with in the first place, so I think that makes her a very good candidate for the fair fight tier. Next up is Ao Hyodoshi, the only member of Reloss not to be in the bottom tier. Now Ao is pretty tall. She has a good height on her, a good build, and on top of that, she is capable of playing some mind games during a fight, maybe rizzing me off my game a bit, which I wouldn't mind. I wouldn't mind that at all. I'm accepting 2 mind games and rizzing me off my game. That's totally fine with me. But for those reasons, I think Ao would also be in the fair fight tier. Next up, we have Hosho Marin, and Marin is a pirate, and pirates are supposed to be tough as hell. And I would assume Marin has some pirate abilities like swashbuckling, knowing how to raid, driving ships and stuff, which makes her a pretty capable person, but she's also old. And she's stiff, you know, so I think that evens her out a lot, making this fight a lot fairer. Next up, we have Omaru Polka, who is a circus performer, which would mean she's pretty quick-witted and pretty athletic to be able to perform like that day in and day out. She also has a lot of high energy, but other than that, she is pretty normal, so I think due to that, she evens out just a bit, making this fight pretty fair. Similar to Polka, we have Subaru. Subaru also seems athletic, very sportsy, very high energy, and because of that, she'd also be a fair fight in that regard. We have Pavolia Reine, who has a very good size on her. Now, based on lore, she's supposed to be able to use a little bit of magic, but not too much because it's been sealed off for one reason or another. But because she can only use so much magic, I think that would make her a fair fight. Next up, we have Shirakami Fubuki. Now, Fubuki looks to be pretty fast. She also looks like she's a dirty, scrappy fighter similar to Risu and Kobo, and she also has that main protagonist energy to her. You know, the ability to really persevere, to keep on going, and I think because of that, that's gonna make her a tough fight to beat. So putting her here in the fair fight tier seems pretty reasonable. Next up, we have Tsunamaki Watame, and similar to Lapis and Choco, she has those horns that look like could be a very big problem if she headbutts me in a very bad place. So that's something I'd have to work for. But she is a sheep, so that I would think she has a little bit of sheep mentality, making her easier prey than most. So putting her on the fair fight tier list seems pretty reasonable. Lastly, we have Vestia Zeta of Hololive ID. Now, Zeta is supposed to be a secret agent, so I would assume she has agent-like training, you know, hand-to-hand combat. She probably knows how to use a weapon, even if she doesn't have it on her person, but she also seems to be a bit on the clumsy side, which evens her abilities out, so putting her here in fair fight seems good. And that ends the fair fight tier, so we are moving on to the they have the advantage tier. This is the tier list for the girls that definitely have an ability or a weapon of some kind that puts them in a pretty good position, but they also have a lot of unknowns which make it unclear just how powerful they are. So first up, we have Amane Kanata, who is an angel. Now, we know Kanata has very amazing grip strength, could pretty much crush my arm if she gets a hold of it. My question is whether or not she can fly. Now, she's an angel, so you would assume she could fly, but I've never seen her fly in any lore or official, material. So, assuming she could fly, she would be much higher on this tier list, but because I don't know if she can, I think putting her here and they have the advantage is pretty good. Next up, we have Crazy Ollie, who is undead, which is a big advantage for her, but she doesn't really have any powers or abilities to help with that as well, so that evens out just a little bit. Now, she does have that big sword in her head, but I don't know if she can remove it and use it. If she could, she'd be higher on the list for sure, but since I don't know some of those things, I think putting her here is pretty decent. Next, we have Murasaki Shion, who is a little witch girl. She's supposed to have mage powers, but I do not know the extent of how good, how powerful, how much reserve she has in terms of magical energy. So because of all those unknowns, putting her here and they have the advantage seems very fitting. Moving on, we have Raora Pantera of Hololive. Just as she has cat-like agility for sure, being a panther, very good eyesight. She also has those metal claw attachments on her arms, which are very dangerous. So I think putting her here is pretty good. Next up, we have Sakamate Chloe of HoloX. Now, she's supposed to have orca powers. Now, I don't know what the hell Orca Powers entails. I have no idea. So there's a lot of unknowns there. She seems just generally very tough to pin down as a character in terms of ability and lore. She's very mysterious in that fact. So because she has so many unknowns, I do think she's powerful. I just don't know to what extent. So putting her here is okay. And lastly, we have Takanelui, also of HoloX. She seems to be one of the most capable members in HoloX in terms of lore, and she also has that nasty whip that's very cool, very unique. Not as dangerous as, say, a sword or an axe, but still could do some pretty good damage. So because of that, I think putting her here on this tier is a good decision. So that ends that tier, so we are going to move on to the next one, the They Most Likely Beat Me tier. This is the tier for the girls that I have very little confidence in beating, but they are missing maybe one or two things that are keeping them from taking the top tier spot. So first off, we have Cecilia Emergreen of Hololive Justice. Now, she is an automaton, which means she is made out of a lot of metal, which means she is going to be a problem to defeat just physically. That's basically me fighting a shield, and if that's the case, I don't think I'm gonna win. I think I'm gonna either pass out of exhaustion, or I'm gonna break my very own bones. So with that said, I think Cecilia putting her here is a pretty good spot. Next up, we have Gargura, who is a tiny girl, but she is also a shark, and sharks can be very dangerous. She has those sharp teeth of hers, and she also has that tail that looks like it can pack a punch. She's also been shown to feature a trident, and that trident looks very dangerous as well. So I think Gura is actually a pretty good when it comes to being a fighter, so putting her here seems pretty reasonable. Next up, we have Hoshimachi Suisei, who definitely seems to be the most normal member in this tier, but she has proven that she can show psychotic tendencies. She looks like she can be a really ruthless fighter, and she just generally is a woman that scares the hell out of me, but I'm kind of into that. So that's pretty cool. Next up is Inugami Korone, who seems to be very athletic. She's proven with her performances that she is very flexible, very athletic, and she also knows boxing, which is very, very bad when you're going in a one-on-one fight and you don't know anything. You don't know any martial skills at all. So Korone has a very great advantage over me, so putting her here seems very good. Next up is Koseki Bijou, and similar to Cecilia, she seems very tough physically. Now, Bijou is the manifestation, the crystallization of human emotion, and because she's just covered in so many crystals and rock hard, it seems like it's going to be hard to beat her physically, plus those crystals look like they are both good at defense and offense, making her pretty damn dangerous. Next up is Narissa Ravencroft. Now, Narissa Ravencroft seems she'd be very tough to take down. For one, she has very good height, very good build on her, and on top of that, she has demonic sound powers, which seems like a very big issue. I wouldn't even know where to start in dealing with that, so because of that, I think putting her here is a very good decision. And lastly on this tier, we have Shishiro Botan, who is a lion girl. Lions are very powerful creatures, so those abilities might also be onto her as well. Also, she has proven to be very intelligent. She's one of the most intelligent members in all of Hololive, which is not good for me. And on top of that, she might have good abilities with guns, giving her gaming experience in shooting games. So because of that, Botan seems like a complete threat, and putting her here sounds reasonable. And now we move on to the last tier list. This is the They Beat Me tier list. This is a list for the girls I have zero confidence in beating them. I know for a fact that they are the total package. They would destroy me like it was nothing. Okay, so starting off in this tier list, we have Sarasvana and Orocrony of Hollow Promise. Now, Sarasvana has nature powers, which pretty much means I'm freaking screwed. There's no way I am beating the abilities to make plants grow, control trees and nature and all that, so I'm pretty much gonna get destroyed there. Now, Orocrony is the War in Time, which means she has time-related powers. On top of that, she has those twin blade clock sword thingies at her disposal, and she seems to be very hard to take down, so because of those reasons, those girls land there. Next up, we have Gigi Mooding and Elizabeth Rose Bloodflame of Hololive Justice. Now, Gigi, very similar to Gura, she seems to be very athletic, very energetic. She is the chaser of justice, which means she has loads and loads of experience, not only pursuing, but taking down bad guys, which pretty means I'm also screwed in that regard. And for Elizabeth Rose Bloodflame, she's got a big, huge, gigantic sword. There's nothing I can do to defend myself against that. I'm gonna get cut in half if I face this woman. Speaking of swords, we have two swordsmen that also land on this tier list, Kazuma Iroha and Nakiri Ayame. Now, Iroha is a freaking samurai, and I have no doubt in my mind that she can use that sword to slice me and dice me into little pieces, so she lands here pretty easily. As for Nakiri Ayame, she has two swords, which makes her a dual sword fighter, and on top of that, she has Oni powers, so that makes her even deadlier, so putting her here is a no-brainer. Next up, we have Kayla Kowalska of Hololive ID. Now, being a swordsmith doesn't initially sound very OP, but given that she's proven herself to beat Bibu, who I have the tier before, she is capable of beating Bibu. Because she's a swordsmith, she'd also be capable of beating someone like Cecilia, who's made of a bunch of metal. I think because of that, because she can beat those people below her, I think putting her here seems pretty fair to me. Next up is Mori Calliope. As we know, she is Death's apprentice. She has a big, huge scythe on her. She has Reaper powers, and to top it all off, she is from Texas, which makes her Texas tough, so I have no doubt that she is gonna kick my ass when we face one-on-one. Next up, we have Ninomiya Inanis, also of Hollow Myth. Now, Ina has those tentacles, being a priestess of the Ancient Ones, and I don't think I need to tell you guys just what tentacles are capable of doing in anime aspects. I don't think I need to go through this whole, so I'm not going to. Just know that Ina is going to beat me no problem. And to round out the EN girls, we have Takanashi Kiara, who also finds herself on this tier. Now, she has both a sword and a shield, and she has Phoenix abilities, which makes her very tough to take down because she can just rise anew again. So Kiara is going to beat me at some point in that fight. So with that said, she belongs here pretty well. Next up, we have Roboco. Now, Roboco is a cyborg robot girl, and that's pretty much a better version of a human. So with that said, I think it's a no-brainer that she beats me. We also have Shinogane Noelle on here, who is one of the beefiest knights you'll ever come across. She has that mace, which looks like can do a lot of damage. So because she's got armor, she's got a good size on her, and she's got a dangerous mace, I think it's a no-brainer as well that she would absolutely destroy me. And lastly, to finish off this tier list, we have Yukihana Lami, who is an ice elf and has ice powers, and ice powers do not mix well with human beings. So because of that, Lami can easily freeze me, beat me with her ice powers, so she is the last member to gain entry on this tier. And that ends this tier list. This is how I think it would go down if I face each of these girls in a one-on-one fight. What do you guys think? Do you think some girls can move up and down? I certainly think there's a lot of room for movement here, so let me know down in the comments down below who you would move and why. I'd love to read those. I hope you guys enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun for me to make and work on. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, please drop a like, comment, and subscribe. I make multiple Hololive related videos every week, so if you're looking for more content like this, I am your guy, Mikigai, and with all that said, I wish you guys all the love and peace.